From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Chatting with Andrew Mason from DNVR, thednvr.com. You and I were talking before my show yesterday, I think before yours as well, about what we can expect from George Paton. Like what you've learned chatting with people about the kind of man he's going to be, and more importantly, about what the kind of GM he's going to be, and as a juxtaposition to what we're used to with John Elway. What did you learn?
Now, the thing I've learned is that George Paton is somebody who's going to make sure he has a plan for everything, that there's a plan A, but there's a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. He is somebody who's going to plan for contingencies, plan for the unexpected. I mean, this kind of comes up with the notion of, hey, could Deshaun Watson be available, or is he not going to be available? George Paton, I'm quite certain, based on what I've learned, has a plan of attacking the availability of Deshaun Watson if that happens. He's kind of like at NASA. You've got the primary system, then you got a backup, then you got a backup upon a backup, and so on. Whereas, it's one of the things that you and I were talking about, Ryan, was that John Elway, he's someone who famously said, there is no plan B. We're going with plan A. And so they have two different styles of kind of going about things. George Paton is somebody who wants to be prepared for any circumstance, any possibility. It's part of the reason why he's in at 4:50 in the morning going to work, because it takes time to kind of go through everything and know what you're going to do should any of these scenarios come forward.
Well, I think it's apropos that you invoked NASA, because Houston, we have a problem with Deshaun Watson's availability right now. That Houston has convinced itself, the Texans organization has convinced itself that Deshaun Watson's going to be their quarterback, or they're going to let him sit. Everything that I've heard from everybody around that organization is that they're deadly serious about that. Yeah. Do you think that organization changes its mind?
I think it changed its mind, but not for a while. Guys, I wouldn't be surprised to see this thing linger into the regular season. And maybe it's going to be another Carson Palmer-like situation a decade ago in Cincinnati, where he held out and didn't sign anything, and they just said, okay, fine. And they went ahead and picked Andy Dalton, and they basically traded Carson Palmer at the last possible moment that year. They traded him to the Raiders right before the deadline. And so I could see this Deshaun Watson impasse stretching into the season.
Okay, so if you're the Broncos, and your intention, of course, is to win this next year, I
Yes.
think a lot of coaches would really like to see that, as well as the fan base. When do you have to make your decision by?
As to whether to pick up Deshaun Watson?
As to whether to wait out the Texans in this situation?
Well, I think you can wait it out and still go forward with your plan. I mean, for example, you can wait it out and say, we're going to sign a veteran to compete to a one-year contract. There are going to be a lot of one-year contracts around the league. It's going to be no problem to get a veteran hedge in here on a one-year deal, or on a two-year deal that's practically, for cap purposes, a one-year deal, to compete with Drew Lock, to push him, or at least make sure that you're covered as far as a backup plan. But another reason why I bring up that Bengals situation, Carson Palmer from a decade ago, is this. Of course, he gets traded to the Raiders. The Raiders were 4-2, and Jason Campbell was playing at a league average level. He was their starter that year, but they wanted something more, and they went ahead and traded for Carson Palmer. So, I mean, I could see a scenario happening where the Broncos sign a veteran backup, go into the preseason and training camp, and even into the regular season with Drew Lock and that veteran backup. But if what they're getting is just league average or less play from the quarterback position, then they're still in position to where they can go make a deal for Deshaun Watson. And oh, by the way, if they trade down, if they are able to trade down in this year's draft, if that's something that's a possibility, and they can pick up future draft capital for trading down this year, then that actually gives them a more advantageous position to pursue Deshaun Watson in a trade, because they may have more draft capital to work with then.
You are preaching to the choir on that. I've been trying to think. The other part of this for me, the other piece of this puzzle, is Dak Prescott. And I know it's, totally different quarterback and everything else, but from what I understand, Dallas is going to franchise tag him, but neither side actually expects to reach a long-term deal. So for me, I've got one eyeball cautiously on the future with that situation because for me, I would rather go into a bidding war with the money side of the house with Dak Prescott than I would an asset side of the house that I would have to give up for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, and you know what? There's a lot to be said for that because you're not sacrificing draft capital. And the thing with Deshaun Watson, and hey, I'd love to see the Broncos end up with him if it were all possible. But there is that trap that you might get into of having a high-dollar quarterback and not having the cost-controlled assets in terms of draft picks to surround him and make sure that you've still got a quality roster in terms of the cap. Whereas Dak Prescott, like you say, it's only a financial thing. So if you bring him in, you can still keep those draft picks and surround him with talent. Now, Deshaun Watson's a bit better than Dak Prescott, but the question on Prescott is this. He's kind of in that second tier. Deshaun's in the first tier. Dak's in the second tier. Is it possible that he can elevate himself to get to that first tier, A? And B, can he do well with what would surround him here? Because, hey, he had a lot of assets in Dallas. He's had Ezekiel Elliott. He's had some outstanding wide receivers. Of course, if he came to Denver, he'd have outstanding wide receivers. The other thing that is in place, the old cliche, bird in the hand versus two in the bush. Dak Prescott is the bird in the hand, and he does get you to a top 10 quarterbacking level. Maybe not elite in that top 5, but certainly better than about 2/3 of the league.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, Dan Graziano reports that the Broncos will not pick up the option on Von Miller. We'll discuss it next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, let's get to this Von Miller news. Dan Graziano this morning reporting. Reporting, I guess is the best way to frame it. Speculating?
Dan Graziano. Okay, so that's the thing. It was presented as a report, but when you dig in on it, it actually was not a report. It was him speculating.
Okay, well, let me lay the table. Let me lay it out, and then you can tell me what is fact and what is fiction. So Dan Graziano on ESPN this morning saying that the Broncos were likely to move on from Von Miller. They will not pick up his option, and he will become a free agent. You did some digging. All of the local insiders did some digging. You can find it all over Twitter. But you specifically, as our resident NFL insider, what did you find out?
I happened to be awake early in the morning when this thing came out. I made a couple of calls over the front office there, and they got back to me within 20 minutes, and we're like, yeah, this is not accurate at all. We haven't even made a decision. We have not talked to Von Miller's representation or Von about this yet, and they would be the first two people to know. So I don't know where this is coming from. And then they also said we've got till March 17th, and we're probably going to use quite a bit of that time to weigh this out. So we want Von to be here, for life, which, and the way that things were framed to me was essentially that, they're looking to try to extend or, restructure into an extension, Von Miller. And, we're going to be equivalent over that. And they've got till March 17th to get it done, so they've got plenty of time. Okay.
So where are you leaning as of this moment right now? Because I was asked this all day long.
Right.
Where are you leaning right now?
50-50.
Okay, so it is truly 50-50 in your opinion.
It's truly 50-50. I think there are a couple of factors here that we're not talking about just yet. One of those is the investigation with the Parker Police Department. Von Miller needs to not be charged in that.
Absolutely.
And I think they need to come to an agreement on the money. And I think that's the other hurdle, and I think they're working on those elements. I think it's true 50-50, maybe a 55-45 in favor of them keeping him. So a slight lean as far as that goes, but it's a true coin flip at this part. At this part, nobody, nothing's been decided or no decisions have been handed out. They're trying to get it done. If they don't, they don't.
So you get the sense that the organization, even with George Paton taking over, because I was asked about this, and I said, well, if this was John Elway running things, then I could see a heavier lean to wanting to keep him because this was his signature player. Like, this was my first draft pick kind of thing. And the affinity for him, he's an all-time Bronco player, not just defensive player, just player. And he's been a face of the franchise for the last decade plus. And so I could see if John Elway was the guy calling the shots here, then it would be probably more like a 60-40 to 70-30. But then you have to factor in George Paton, who actually gets to make this decision. And so then it throws a little bit of a wild card in this. The only question I have, besides all of everything that you answered perfectly, was what else are you going to use this money on? I mean, again, so say you restructure and you just say, hey, listen, we're not paying him $18 million based on the productivity level he's bringing. Mm-hmm. Fine, he still has value. Mm-hmm. And so the restructure is a big part, but where else are you using that cap space? Like right now, you're $31 million under. I know that you have other things you want to do, but you have other ways to free up money too.
You need $9 million to sign your draft picks.
Right.
You got to get the Justin Simmons thing done. You want to bring Shelby back. I would suggest if they don't get Vaughn done, that I would look heavily at the Broncos just punting on Juwan James. And that's what that money would be used on.
Wow.
I would suggest that if they don't get it done, that's what would be the result. They would use that to eat that.
Okay.
So,
there's a little bit of a pecking order there. And, of course, the Broncos basically played this whole last season with the offensive line more or less performing at a level that it hasn't in a while, a consistency. And you've already reported multiple times that Juwan James is going to have to earn his way back in to the good graces of some of the guys in the locker room.
Very much so. And they've been vocal about that.
Yes.
It's not like they haven't been. So, and, to be honest with you, I think a lot of those guys are pulling for Calvin Anderson and Elijah Wilkinson.
Yeah.
Those two guys were ready to play, gutted it out through injury, gutted it out through a couple of bad seasons. And, I think that the guys who gutted it out next to them kind of want to see them get the reward, So I don't know that I do know this. They want to bring him back. They want to bring Vaughn back. They know that they need pass rushers because you need pass rushers in the AFC West. They know that. In fact, that was specifically stated today. But I just, unless they can make the money work and get the criminal thing cleared up down in Parker, which we expect that to be.
Yeah, you said that from the beginning, that your expectation was this is something that will likely be moved along. And BK, Brandon Cristal, our KOA Broncos insiders, also backed that up. Mm-hmm. So, but again, it isn't gone yet. So for right now, we have to roll with it as part of the equation, don't we?
Yes, we definitely do. And beyond that, you got to get the money to work. It is just a situation that particular air quotes report coming today was rather bizarre.
Yeah,
because you're a month away from where you have to make a decision on that. And the Broncos haven't talked to Von Miller's people, so it wasn't coming from Von and the agent's side. So where did it come from?
Was it just logic? Conclusion?
I don't know.
I mean, because I don't really know what it was.
I'll say this: the Broncos front office personnel that I talked to were very complimentary of Dan Graziano. Like he's a good reporter, but we don't know what this is. So,
yeah, I also thought the timing was kind of interesting, but it's been a weird offseason already.
Yeah, they also said another report that was out there, a local reporter put out there about them pursuing Deshaun Watson was not entirely accurate. That if Deshaun comes available, we'll look into that. But yeah, the report as stated, and it was just before James's thing came out. The report as stated was not exactly accurate. That was their plan. That's not. They were like that's not the plan. The plan right now is Drew Lock and a veteran, as some people have been telling you. If Deshaun becomes available, they will look into that, and they understand by their count they're going to be up against 16 teams for him.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, George Cheruri from Pro Football Focus joins the program. What can Drew Lock improve on? What did he like about his game last year? We'll find out.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Chatting with George Cheruri from Pro Football Focus. In all your time of watching Drew Lock and PFF breaking him down, did you ever get the sense that maybe he just doesn't play with enough urgency, or he's too cool, or because he played AAU basketball? Like when you watched him, do you think this is a guy that just thinks he's too cool for this job?
God, you can't even disparage him in a apple kissing way. That was for the family hour.
Too
right
casual.
there,
Too casual. He's too casual.
He's too casual.
What does that even mean? What is that a football term? Like maybe I'm missing something. I've never heard of a too casual quarterback.
I mean, he doesn't wear – he wears khaki-colored pants, but they're not actually khaki pants. He's just a little too casual. He wore jeans on Friday and Hawaiian shirt day.
If anybody wonders what we're talking about, Colin Cowherd used this as a rant today on why he's out on Drew Luck. He says he's too casual, doesn't play with enough urgency. He's too cool, and he needs to be urgent. So I need you, as a representative of PFF, to explain that in the most logical football terms you can.
Okay, I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best. Here's how I would kind of put it in two buckets. So the first bucket I would look at is, what does he do from a clean pocket? 14th in PFF grade per snap among 32 quarterbacks from a clean pocket. And that, to me, says, look, the casual, the laid-back nature of Drew Lock helps him when the situation is there, right? He is making some nice throws from a clean pocket. That is a good thing. But deeper into the shot clock, 2.5 seconds plus, 3 seconds plus, under pressure, we see kind of this just falling apart. But it's not a falling apart in that he's like skittish or anything. It's that he's just willing to do whatever it takes, to try whatever it takes in those situations. And it's not having great results. And I'll point to 26.2 passer rating under pressure this last year, which, granted, play under pressure is not very stable. It could very well bounce back, especially given the kind of shots he takes. But it's, almost 8% of his throws were graded as turnover worthy under pressure, which is 50% higher than the NFL average. And that's the casual attitude, right? He's so calm. He's so cool that no matter what's going on around him, he's willing to give it a shot, willing to throw it 20 yards downfield. That's my best attempt at explaining.
That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, that is, and that dovetails neatly with exactly what I wanted to go next with that. Isn't that just a trait of young quarterbacks, though? Isn't the YOLO ball and not just taking the safe check down thing because they got away with it in college? Isn't that often a trait of young quarterbacks?
Yes, and I think that is. I think that is part of what we have to, build into our assessment. And I do talk about this a decent amount. I try to tell this to people, right? It's like play under pressure is not something that you want to live and die by. And so I think there are some positives when you look at him from a clean pocket where he's making some big time throws down the football field. And those are things that I don't want to use this phrase again, but like you can't teach that, And so I agree with you. Like you can be not overly positive on a guy's prospects, like I might be because of his inaccuracy, but I can certainly admit that there is far from a non-zero chance that he is able to remedy those things. He continues to improve from a clean pocket, and those big throws stay, and all of a sudden he's a top 10 quarterback. I'll certainly acknowledge that.
There was something that he said, and this is the last thing for you. Appreciate you popping on tonight. There was something that Colin Cowherd said, and I don't want to agree with anything, but there was one thing he said in there that I think was kind of an interesting point about the time spent developing quarterbacks. And how he said that doesn't mean that the league is necessarily out on a guy if he doesn't work out in his first stop. He pointed to Ryan Tannehill. He even says, I think Marcus Mariota will have another revitalized opportunity at some point. And Jameis Winston's getting his second chance, so on and so forth. He said, just because it doesn't work out with your original team doesn't mean you're done in the league. Now, of course, he went on to say Drew Lock can't play. So, take that for what it's worth. But there's an interesting point there about how the league has shifted. And I know we've talked about this with you before, but there's an indication here about the amount of time. He said you get 1 year, you get one opportunity with the team, and if you can't really show it, unless you're Jameis Winston, who was a first overall pick, then the team almost has to move on at that point.
Yeah, I think we're getting to a point where teams are going to be more willing to, to let the ship sail and try again. Because everyone's like starting to realize that if you want to win a Super Bowl, you go for it all, right? You got to get a great quarterback. And so there'll be more of these opportunities for guys to get a second shot. There'll be younger in their career, I think, on average. And I'm surprised that Cowherd, maybe he did. I would have expected him to make this reference, right? The first time you fall in love, okay, it doesn't always work out. It doesn't always end in happily ever after. Sometimes you need to get broken up with, kind of have that look in the mirror moment, say, what the hell's going on? And the second or third or fourth or fifth time, depending on who you are, it hits and you figure it out. And it doesn't mean that just because your first relationship doesn't work out that you'll never have a successful one.
What if you've never been dumped?
Really getting my Cowherd on right now.
What if you've never been dumped, though?
Look, I'm in that boat. So
that's why I came to you.
It's a gift.
It's George Drury, the Hitch. You can find him at PFF Hitch.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, I don't even know. I feel like we went off the rails, but I don't even actually know where that point was. So now I'm just going to say, George, it's always good to have you on. Thanks for the time.
It's the moment I press accept phone call. That's when the rails have been left. But I love hanging out with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight. Tune in to Broncos TV every weeknight at 6:30, right here on KTVD Channel 20.